Hey everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from February 24th, 2023, and I'm recording this on Friday, August 25th, 2023. As always, I give you those dates so you know when this information is most relevant because the market is always moving and changing, as you will see in this video, as we talk about these books and the price differences of just 6 months. As always, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. Each week, they put out a list of 10 books that are hot or trending in the market at that time. And we're looking back at them 6 months later to know what books you should have been patient on, what books were worth chasing, and yeah, just see what we can learn so we make better decisions in the moment. If you've been following us, you know, generally it's be patient. This week is no exception to that. It's definitely the rule this week, but let's dig into this list and see what we can learn because we got 19 books to talk about. First up, we have The Last of Us, American Dream, #1. Back on the list because they had announced a season 2 with 2 episodes left in season 1. 9.8s were hitting 14 to 1700 back then. 9.6s were 6 to 700, which weren't up that much from the beginning of the season, but just a little bit. Now raw copies are 80 to 120. 9.6, most recent sale is a 550. Really hasn't been a super recent 9.8 sale. So you can see, but the general trend here is an I'll be back, just backed up a little bit. Did not become the trap I thought it would as we moved away from the season. Maybe it's been able to sustain better because we know there's a season 2 coming, although often that's not the case. That often doesn't really matter, but so far in this case, it has been able to hold up. Next, we have Something is Killing the Children, #1 from 2019. Was back on the list, back up in value because we got updates that Netflix was still working on this. 9.8s were back up to 750 to 800. At one point, they were over 1,000, but they were back on the move, going in the positive direction. Since then, we haven't gotten really any updates. Raw copies now are 225 to 375. 9.8s, 525 to 800. So another down, I'll be back. There are still some sales on that upper end, but more than that, you would have saved if you'd been patient here. Still a great book. At some point, I do expect we'll get some sort of adaptation of the series, but I have the feeling we're going to still be waiting for a little bit. All right, next, we have Asinia, sorry, number 13. And this was hitting the list because I guess it contained the first of 5 coupons to redeem for special J. Scott Campbell and Frank Miller variants. It's amazing they still do this kind of stuff, and that, you know, that people still cut these out, turn these in, or however these coupons are in this particular book. But yeah, this was the first of 5. So I guess people were suddenly jumping on this. Raw copies were going, maybe because they finally had seen what the variants looked like. I don't know. But anyway, back then raw copies were going for 25 to 30. Now it's a $10 to $30 book for raw copy, which is, you know, it's an I'll be back, but it's still selling for decent money. Interestingly enough, the interest appears to be solely in the coupons because a 9.9, there was a sale for 50. Like 9.9s don't usually go for a super premium. Yeah, but this only rated $50 for 9.9 of this because so people really do just want these for the coupons. All right, next we have we're moving into our covers, and we have our first political cover. These typically don't do well, but this is Cerberus in Hell. Cancel America, #1. I'm not going to talk about the particular politics of this other than just whatever side they are on, they usually don't do that well performance-wise. Back then, raw copies were going for 40. Now it's a $20 to $30 book. So yeah, that's a trap. That's almost half of what it was back then. I'm honestly surprised. I predicted trap, and that's what it did. I'm honestly a little surprised it didn't even become a dumpster fire. But definitely a trap so far. We'll see if it holds up any further than that. Next, we have Invincible Iron Man, #1, the second print, Bob Layton, 1 in 25. We talked about this book last week because there's been no recent sales here. That first week it was 45 to 60. By week 2, it was up to 70. Now there's no recent sales. Like I said, the asking price on the only copy I see up for sale is like $2.99. So yeah, we're gonna put this as steady, but because I would guess if one came up for 70, it might go, but it's so hard to tell in a situation like this whether or not this book is going to maintain any sort of value when it actually gets listed for a reasonable price. So it's just no way to know for sure, but we'll put it as steady because we can't really say otherwise. All right, next we have Lazarus Planet Omega, #1, the Helene Lenoble, 1 in 50. I probably butchered her name, but this is a great cover of Power Girl. There's been a lot of Power Girl covers this year. Lots of artists. She's getting her own series. She's been in action a bunch. There's been a ton of her covers. This is maybe still my favorite of the bunch. Just a really cool cover, at least to me. But this 1 in 50 back then was going for 70 plus, which means not even double ratio, which usually means it's a bit of a trap. And it turned out that it is now a $40 to $50 book, so it's slightly below ratio, right on target and what it should be. 9.8, 160. So yeah, this one should have been a trap because it didn't even get the double ratio, and that's what it became. But yeah, still a really cool cover in my opinion. Next, we have Superman #1, the Jamal Campbell 1 per store black and white foil variant. This one back then was going for 30 to 55, which 1 per stores typically are basically the equivalent of 1 in 25. So, and usually they follow basically the same rules, which means it's got to get to triple ratio, so around $75 there on a 1 per store. Now raw copies are 30. Back then were 30 to 55, so barely, not even quite getting to double. Now raw copies are 40. This one actually was steady. That's a bit of a surprise, but it did. It maintained between double and triple ratio, or it maintained where it was at. As I cannot talk this week. I should probably cut this out, but I won't. You guys can see how I talk. But 9.8 did go for like 180, which is pretty high, but raw copies still right in that range where it was at months ago. All right, next we're going to move into some Sony Spiders kind of books. We got, well, one book, and that is Vault of Spiders #1, the first appearance of Spider Bite. This is the Marcos Martin variant. And this was in the lead up to Across the Spider-Verse. We did get Spider Bite and Across the Spider-Verse. Back then, raw copies were going for 20 to 30, 9.8 going for 150 plus. Now it's a $5 to $15 book with no recent 9.8 sales. So yeah, that's a dumpster fire. And that's kind of, at the time, back 6 months ago, I asked, what's Penny Parker worth now? And yeah, that's basically what's happened here. This book is backed way, way up because there's been no sustained interest in Spider Bite, even though her role was small, but kind of good. It was pretty good. I enjoyed it in the movie, but it was just a small role, and this book is backed up. Next, we have Marvel Boy #1, the first appearance of Novar. Back then, raw copies were going for 25 plus, based on Stephen Yeun being cast, who's awfully old to be Marvel Boy, but anyway, he was supposedly cast for something, and they were speculating this might be it. Seems kind of odd, but yeah, it caused this book to jump to 25 plus. Now it's a $5 to $15 book. 9.8, 85, 150. There are 2 sales there on the 9.8 side recent. But that 5 to 15 is a dumpster fire compared to 25 plus from 6 months ago on the raw side, which is what most of the sales are. Yeah, I didn't. This one seemed like a stretch back then, and it appears to have been, yeah, a stretch. Although I don't think we actually know who Stephen Yeun is playing, but we took another guess. In addition to Marvel Boy, we were guessing on Amazing Fantasy 15, the first appearance of Amadeus Show. This book was back up to $700 for 9.8. 9.6s were going $3 to $333. Now it's a $60 to $200 book for a raw copy. 9.8, $600 to $800. So basically, it's been steady. That high-end 9.8 sale is basically right in that same range where it was. So we're going to call it steady and worth it. But I really don't. Again, I feel like the actor is a little old to be playing Amadeus Show if they're just now introducing him. So we'll see what happens here. But my guess is a lot of people are specking at some point we're going to get Amadeus Show. I would guess they're probably right, but I don't know if this is the right casting. All right, with that was the end of the CBSI list. Now we're going to talk about the Tom books, because this was another week where Tom was much later on the list, has become the standard at this point. So yeah, these books were done separately and after. First up, we have Hell to Pay, #1. This hit the list because rumors were Seth MacFarlane was going to adapt this for TV. But this book only really was only doing $5 to $15. Just a lot of sales is why Tom put it on the list. It's still a $5 to $10 book, so we're going to still call it Down and I'll Be Back because it's definitely a step back. 9.8 only costs you $40 to $60. We'll see if this ever becomes anything. So far, no follow-up to that initial rumor. I don't think it was confirmed. I think it actually was a rumor. So next, we have Hellboy, The Crooked Man, #1. And this is hitting the list because there was rumors that we were going to get another Hellboy reboot, despite the last one not doing well, and it was going to be based on this particular story. So that's what caused us to hit the list. $20 to $35 back then for raw copies. Now it's a $10 to $30 book, raw copies. 9.9, another 9.9 sale. We don't talk about this very often, but just the one sale. And there weren't any 9.8 sales that I could find, and it went for $100. So not a huge premium on a 9.9 here. This definitely turned into an I'll Be Back. Maybe we get Hellboy again. I would love to get a Hellboy that's great. I still think the first one's really the only one that really was pretty good. I really enjoyed the first one. The rest of them have been not so great. All right, next we have Amazing Spider-Man #7, the first appearance of Spider UK Billy Braddock. And this was rumors that Henry Cavill was going to play Spider UK in some sort of project. Or that he was going to play Billy Braddock in some sort of project. Yeah, this caused this book to jump up to $8 to $20 back then. 9.8 going for $150. Now it's a $5 to $20 book. So raw copies are basically in the same range. You could say I'll Be Back. You could say Worth It on a raw side. But 9.8s are now $35 to $70. And there's multiple sales in that range. So yeah, if you paid $150 for a 9.8 before, and now it's a $50 book basically in a 9.8, that's a dumpster fire. So we're going to put this as down in dumpster fire because of the dramatic drop on the 9.8 side. Obviously the raw sides are sitting kind of in the same range, but that's why this one's being classified as it is. Next, we have Vault of Spiders #1. You're like, wait, we already talked about that. Well, this is the A cover. Before we talked about the variant, this is the A cover. The A cover made Tom's list. The variant made CBSI's list. Back then, this is first appearance of Spider-Bite again. Back then, raw copies were going for $15, which wasn't a huge, but a 9.8 went for $200, right at $199. Now it's a $5 to $30 book, so if anything, maybe you definitely probably call on the raw side Worth It at $15, or at least it worked steady and Worth It. Maybe I'll Be Back, but yeah. But 9.8s now are $60 to $125, and again, multiple sales with most of them being under $100. That's a dumpster fire. Under $100 on what was a $200 book. Yeah, that's a dumpster fire if you bought in at $200 for this 9.8. All right. Next, we're going to move away from the Spiders and we're going to move into the MCU. And we got Avengers Annual #21, the first appearance of Victor Timely. And this had to do with the post-credit on Ant-Man. Second week in a row this was going to be here. Back then, raw copies were $20 to $30. 9.8 we're going $2 to $230. But there was also a $400 sale in there. Now it's a $5 to $15 book. 9.8, $75 to $130. So yeah, that's a dumpster fire. This book has come plummeting back down, even though Loki show is getting close. We're going to get it pretty soon. But this has still been a dumpster fire. Even though we're getting Victor Timely in the Loki show, doesn't seem to matter. All right, next we got all new, all different Avengers #1, the first appearance of Mr. Griffin, another King variant, also had to do with the show coming and post Ant-Man and all that kind of stuff. Back then, raw copies were going for $5 to $20, 9.8, $100 to $140. Now it's a $5 to $15 book, 9.8, $40 to $100, which means it's probably a trap on the 9.8 side, but it's not as dramatic here. And again, the vast majority of the sales are the raw side, so we just put this as down and I'll Be Back. You could argue based on my logic I used on a couple of those previous books that I should have focused on the 9.8 and called it a trap, but either way, it's down. So yeah, so this book is definitely backed up. again, even though we're getting actually closer to the Loki show. All right, next we have Avengers, number 269, Kang versus Immortus, plus we got Ramatut's origin here. Back then, this was a $30 book, 9.8, 125 to 150. Now it's a $10 to $25 book, 9.8, 70 to 100, so definitely a trap on this one. It'll be interesting to see how they handle the whole Kang thing, particularly with everything that's gone on with the actor, but we'll see. So far, it seems like they're going to keep plugging away with him. All right, next we have Avengers number 52, first appearance of Grim Reaper. And this had to do with casting news about the Wonder Man show. And people believe that actually they were casting his brother, which would be the Grim Reaper. So back then, raw copies were going for $30 to $60. 8.5 hit $350. Now it's a $20 to $100 book on the raw side. So that's actually maybe even steady and worth it. Maybe it's because we just had a couple of really high-grade sales to push some of the high sales up to 100. Not sure exactly the difference there. But 8.5 is definitely backed up 220, and that appears to be fairly steady in terms of a step back on the graded copies over the last 6 months. So we're going to call this steady. I'll be back because they're getting a little bit of mixed signals here. But overall, pretty much in a similar range, but definitely a better deal if you'd waited. All right, and then our last book of the week is Giant Size Avengers number 2, The Origin of Ramatut, which we just talked about a couple books ago. I'm not sure exactly how they expanded the origin, or this was a redone origin. This was a 74, so I guess this was the initial origin. The previous book was from 86, so the redone origin of Ramatut, but that's what why this hit the list. Back then, 30 to 90 for raw copies, 9.6 hit 800. No recent sales of a high-grade slab here, but raw copies now are 5 to 50, with most of the sales on the, in the $20, $30 range. So definitely a trap, definitely backed way up from that 30 to 90 we were getting on sales back 6 months ago. So that is this week's list. Everything pretty much, well, a few steadies, but mostly down, 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 which is not unusual when you're doing things off of movies that were being released or about to be released and covers and that kind of stuff. Not a lot, this is very typical for the kinds of books that were on this week's list. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time.